Well, hey, North Park Community Church. Pastor Luke here with another episode of First Looks, and we are back in our Matthew series. This series we pressed pause on as we entered into our Advent series in the month of December, but we are back in our study through the Gospel of Matthew. And remember, we've carried the theme, the way of the King. And currently, we are in the teaching section of Matthew 5 through 7, chapters 5 through 7, which is referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. And currently, we are in chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. That's where we're going to pick back up. If you remember what came before this, we've got the Lord's Prayer, but then also we have warnings that Jesus gives to those practicing their righteousness. He says, if you're fasting so as to be seen by others, if you're praying really long, nice, eloquent King James only prayers, when you're in a group of people, so they'll be impressed with you. If you're giving to the needy, is so that people can see how much you have and how much you give. Then Jesus says your reward is the praise of people. But there's this exhortation from Christ to do what you do, your righteousness in secret, so that your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So we've got this reward theme that is within the context of where we're picking up right now in Matthew 6:19. And this isn't just a new theme that has started to come about in chapter 6. This has been going on since the very beginning. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, who are who mourn, who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They will be satisfied. They will see God. We in the Beatitudes at the beginning of chapter 5, we see that that there is blessedness and there is reward for those who are people of the King, people who are citizens of the kingdom. And so this motif of treasure, reward, priorities, what's most important to us, it comes about in a number of different ways. And right now we're finding ourselves in a particular passage that's very clear and I think very helpful to us about our relationship with earthly things. Now, while I say that it's clear about our relationship with earthly things, I'm saying that as the maybe the main point I think is easily deduced, but the language and the content itself is actually kind of unique, and we do need to do a little digging and unpacking to really grasp all that Jesus is saying here. So with that, let's just go ahead and look at it and see what we come up with. Here's what Jesus says. This is beginning right here. The do not, that's 6:19 right there. Do not lay up. Sorry, let me back it up just a little bit. I still want it to be big for you. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. Now, I'm going to give you a couple different Greek words today because I think it's kind of fun and helpful. But for the do not lay up, this is do not lay up, do not store up is another way to put that. For yourself, treasures. The Greek word here is, I'll give you the English transliteration here, is thesaurus. Thesaurus. And we think of the thesaurus that we would have to give us a collection of synonyms, and it would just kind of be a treasury of synonyms of words. Is kind of how we use it when we think of a thesaurus. But this is little bit more of just a general for wealth. Money sometimes can be a difficult word for us to use because money just looked so different in the first century Israel as it does for us now. And so it's just kind of helpful to remember where wealth was found in the first century context that Jesus is speaking into. And it oftentimes would have been very much possessions that you had. You certainly would have had wealth in land and, livestock, things like that. But also a lot of wealth would have been found in treasures such as maybe some oils, particular heirlooms of jars, potteries. Maybe you'd have some jewelry, different things like that. And then there was money as well, of course. We see money showing up in the Gospels here and there. And if you had maybe a good collection of it, you might hide it somewhere. Perhaps you'd bury it someplace on your property. That's something that will come up in the parables of Matthew 13. That idea of hiding things that we treasure to kind of keep it secure, and so this is kind of a full-orbed wealth, riches, what you have. And Jesus says, don't store up or collect for yourselves wealth on earth. Why? Because the wealth on earth has moth and rust that destroys. So this is an arrow that's getting a little crazy there, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. So things here on earth, if that's what you are working to collect, to acquire, to build up, to store up, if your primary pursuit is the things on this earth, you will find that those things do not last. They get destroyed, and they get stolen, right, is Jesus's point that he's making here. Now, just a fun little thing. This will not make it into the sermon. I am pretty confident of that. But this word right here, rust, interesting that we have this word rust here. Let me show you the word. It's, you'll see it at the top there. Let me get different colors so I can kind of highlight it here, but it's brosis. And what it is literally is food, eating, consuming. So it's things that things that eat, that do eating, or it is the act of eating, or could be food itself as well, depending on its usage and whatnot. We say, well, what in the world is rust there for? And so I just thought I'd maybe just share a little bit with you. What happened with that, why it got translated as rust, is because Jerome, who translated the Greek and the Hebrew into the Latin Vulgate, he used James 5 to interpret this word brosis in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and because Matthew 5 is James 5. James is in many ways an exposition of the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is wisdom literature that draws heavily from the Proverbs. And so Jerome used Jesus' teaching, and when he translated Jesus' teaching, he used James's explanation or elaboration on Jesus' teaching to be how he interpreted the word brosis, rust, in Matthew. And so this is what it says in James 5. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Okay, so don't treasure up for yourselves things here on earth. Your gold and your silver, here we go. Your gold and your silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. Okay, so there's the warning to the rich from James. It's intense, certainly, but you got the word corroded right here, which is not brosis, but kariotai right here. And that's the word that is literally corroded or become rusty. So there is a Greek word for something becoming rusty. It's right here, kariotai. And it's not the word that we have in the Sermon on the Mount. Sermon on the Mount says eating things here. And so why do I share all of this with you? Because I get fascinated with stuff like this, and this is my opportunity to to share some of it with somebody else, and it certainly just doesn't have enough relevance to find its way into the sermon. So thank you for bearing with me on that. Hopefully you find that somewhat interesting. I don't know why. Okay, let's press on. So don't store up for yourself things, treasures, wealth on the earth, because that stuff won't last. That's the point. It will not last. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Lay up treasures that are in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. And so heavenly treasures, treasure in heaven lasts, and that it is secure and eternal. Secure and eternal. Okay, so we're comparing two things here, the treasures of earth and the treasures of heaven. And then we get a really important line from Jesus where he says, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Now, we just want to kind of capitalize on this right here. I talk about this often. Hopefully, you already know what I'm going to say. But for anyone that might be newer or have a forgetful mind, let me just remind that this is the control center of a person, where beliefs, thoughts, will, desires, all flow from. Okay, that's the heart. It is not just the emotional center of the person. It is the very core of yourself, of your why you do what you do is because of your heart. And so that's the connection that Jesus is making here. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So treasure, why this is so important is because treasure is what we value, work for, prize, hold on to, fight over, try to protect. Those are the things that we value the most. The things that we treasure the most are the things that we give our lives to. We labor to get it. We fight to preserve it. We hold on to it close. Whether that's save all that for the sermon. Okay, there it is. Suffice it to say. So Jesus is very clear, and it's a very simple point there. The things that you love the most and value the most, that tells you where your heart is really at. It's one thing to say, I love the treasures of heaven more than the treasures of earth. However, that will be shown in the way that you live your life on if that's true or not. And then that flows into this next part. It all works together here. And in this next part, Jesus switches to a metaphor of a common metaphor. This is not new. Jesus didn't coin this phrasing, but the idea that the eye is the lamp of the body. And so, in one sense, this is kind of intuitive, in that if you close your eyes, what do you see? Darkness. If you open your eyes in the light, what do you see? You see brightness. You see light. And so you could call it the lamp. There's apparently a debate out there on if the eye, being the lamp, is the source of the light or the receiver of the light. And apparently that's the theological debate, extramission or intramission. Here, I don't know. Well, I've got thoughts, of course, but the point that I think is important here that would have been readily understood is that the eye serves as a window to the inner person. And that'll work its way out as we move through more of the text here. So the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. Now this word healthy, it's going to be another Greek word that we're going to look at here because it's kind of interesting. Healthy, it works as an English word for us to put there, kind of in the context, but it's not a direct. Healthy isn't a direct definition of the word that we have in the Greek here. So let me show you this one. Haplous. Haplous is our Greek word. You can see it right there. Haplous. And in its most original sense, there's kind of two definitions, and then some kind of derivatives that work from it. But the first one is simple. So you see simplicity, simple, single, simple, single, simple. And then from the simple, the singleness. The second one that often is used as a direct definition would be generous, or generously. You see liberal, generous. Where else we got it? Okay, so there it is. It's single, simple, and generous are kind of the two leading words that define haplous. And so kind of working them together, you get sincere. That's where sincere works out, where it's a single-mindedness, a single focus. And so when you've got a single-minded generosity, that's somebody that's sincere. It's kind of they're devoted to seeing you in front of them, and that bears itself out in their act of generosity. And so that's the Greek word there, simple, single, generous, sincere. That's the Greek word that's being translated as, let me switch that back, as healthy right here. And this one is more important than rust. This one will find its way into my sermon. I'm pretty sure of that. So here we go again. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, if it's singular, if it's generous, if it's haplous, then your whole body will be full of light. So if your eye is haplus, your body will be filled with light. But if your eye is bad, or this is actually kind of evil, is the Greek. If it's bad, if it's evil, then your whole body will be full of darkness. If you got a bad window, then the light doesn't get inside and you're full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? And so if the light that you're displaying outwardly is actually darkness, and that darkness is even worse darkness, is what it's saying. So this is getting into the concept here of even a hypocrisy. And so what's this telling us? It's telling us that if your eye, the way, and this is a little bit of this is working in a kind of really cool way here. The way the metaphor is working within this whole context here. If you see others with a singleness, not a double-mindedness, but a singleness, if you see others with generosity, and you, as you see them, generosity flows from you, then what will happen? Your body will be full of light. Now, who is the light of the world? Well, Jesus is the light of the world in John's gospel, but in Matthew's gospel, in chapter 5, it says that his followers are the light of the world. And so as we see the world like this, as we see the world with generous hearts, then we will be light bearers. We will be filled with light internally, and it will exude itself from us. However, if the eye is bad, and we become, really in the context here, the way it's going to work itself out is that if we become a selfish, a greedy, a stingy type of person, then we have darkness really within us. Our eyes have become corrupted, and they're not doing the job that they're supposed to do. There's something wrong with them, and we're filled with darkness. And the themes of light and dark, goodness, they run throughout the scriptures, especially in the Gospels a lot. So we'll see how much I want to toy with that. But it really is kind of a little bit of a really cool thing Jesus is doing there. And so that then takes us to the final part here, which is, again, going to be pretty straightforward, but one that really comes with a challenge to us. And this is going to be a good section for just kind of that pastoral exhortation to kind of close this section out. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. So this right here has the root of what gets translated as slave, and which is slave is the Greek. Maybe you've heard of it. doulos is it's the noun that oftentimes, the noun oftentimes gets translated as servant because using the word slave is it's less palatable in our post slavery American context. That sometimes it can just have a bad association there, and so oftentimes English translations will go with the softer servant rather than the more honest translation, which is slave. And so you cannot slave for two masters, right? Because slavery is an identity deal. It's an ownership deal. You can't belong to two. And so, can I serve two bosses? Yeah, I could serve two bosses if I'm working two part-time jobs or whatever. So that's where servant just kind of, you can maybe send us just a little bit of astray, and it's kind of helpful for us to preserve the slave language here. No one can be a slave for two masters. You'll either hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God, which is master one, and money, which is master two. You cannot live for both. They will come into conflict. Because they have different values and ideals of what it means of the, quote, good life. Now, obviously, this is, again, money isn't a person, to literally be a slave to. It's not a personal figure. It's a personification here of money. Just again to make the point that I think is pretty self-evident. And so this is in one sense an easy to understand passage. In another sense, it's got a certain level of literary dynamic that searches us in a little bit of a unique way in the way that it's framed up, but it invites us into maybe a different level of introspection, to ask maybe some different questions of ourselves than what we typically do when it comes to our relationship with wealth and money and things in this world. It invites us to ask some of those questions that I think are really important for us to ask as 21st century Americans, where there is more at our disposal. There's more that we can acquire. There's just so much, and so this passage, I think, is one for us to take seriously and reflect on, and even be prepared to maybe even have our toes stepped on a bit by this passage, as it calls us to let go of the things that many of us hold on very tightly to, and to find that there's a deeper identity to be found, a deeper treasure to behold, when we fix our eyes on Christ, truly to the expense of everything else. Not necessarily saying that we go and, I'll preach about it. I'll stop now. All right, church. I love you. Excited to be with you on Sunday and to look at God's Word together.